One of the things that we do at the law school is we have a program that engages in outreach to Columbus City school students that think they might have an interest in law, or their parents think that they want them to be involved in a program. But we work with kids from the time they leave 8th grade. They spend 5 weeks with us during the summer, every summer until they graduate, and they are with us during the academic year. And that recognition, that interest about the importance of education in overcoming many of the challenges that Rob, displayed as he read through those materials. We picked out an excerpt from Warriors Don't Cry, which is a memoir of Melba Batillo Beals, who was involved in the battle to integrate Little Rock's Central High. And so, just a little background, she was one of the 9 black teenagers who integrated Central High School in Little Rock in 1957. And so at the age of 15, when she was taking on this task, it talks about she's facing angry mobs, and the soldiers had to come and ensure that they were able to get into the schools. And so she's remembering this 35 years later, and she kept a diary of some of her experiences. So I'm just going to read the first chapter that talks about her experience and just kind of encourage people to maybe, as they're thinking about books that they might read or things that may add to their understanding of different time frames in our history, and recognize, in one sense, how far we come, and in another sense, we really haven't come that far in some respects since 1957. If you think about the situation of many of our kids in terms of trying to get education and get equal access to a meaningful education that will enable them to not just work, but to really experience lives in a way that an understanding of the influences around you, an understanding of the culture around you, an understanding of science and all the other things that really enhance how we interact with our day-to-day experience. So I work with kids who are trying to realize some of those dreams themselves. So I thought I would, we'll have them, read through some of this themselves to see that some of their struggles are not new, but they're worth fighting. So in 1957, while most teenage girls were listening to Buddy Holly's Peggy Sue, watching Elvis gyrate, and collecting crinoline slips, I was escaping the hanging rope of a lynch mob, dodging lighted sticks of dynamite, and washing away burning acid sprayed into my eyes. During my junior year in high school, I lived at the center of a violent civil rights conflict. In 1954, the Supreme Court had decreed an end to segregated schools. Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus and states' rights segregationalists defied that ruling. President Eisenhower was compelled to confront Faubus to use U.S. soldiers to force him to obey the law of the land. It was a historic confrontation that generated worldwide attention. At the center of the controversy were 9 black children who wanted only to have the opportunity for a better education. On our first day at Central High, Governor Faubus dispatched gun-toting Arkansas National Guard soldiers to prevent us from entering. Mother and I got separated from the others. The 2 of us narrowly escaped a rope-carrying lynch mob of men and women shouting that they'd kill us rather than see me go to school with their children. 3 weeks later, having won a federal court order, we black children maneuvered our way past an angry mob to enter the side door of Central High. But by 11 that morning, hundreds of people outside were running wild, crashing through police barriers to get us out of school. Some of the police, sent to control the mob, threw down their badges and joined the rampage. but a few other brave members of the Little Rock Police Force saved our lives by spiriting us past the mob to safety. To uphold the law and protect lives, President Eisenhower sent soldiers of the 101st Airborne Division, the elite Screaming Eagles, Korean War heroes. On my third trip to Central High, I rode with the 101st in an Army station wagon guarded by jeeps with turret guns mounted on their hoods and helicopters roaring overhead. With the protection of our 101st bodyguards, we black students walked through the front door of the school and completed a full day of classes. But I quickly learned from those who opposed integration that the soldiers' presence meant a declaration of war. Segregationists mounted a brutal campaign against us, both inside and out of school. My 8 friends and I paid for the integration of Central High with our innocence. During those years, when we desperately needed approval from our peers, we were victims of the most harsh rejection imaginable. The physical and psychological punishment we endured profoundly affected all our lives. It transformed us into warriors who dared not cry even when we suffered intolerable pain. I became an instant adult, forced to take stock of what I believed and what I was willing to sacrifice to back up my beliefs. The experience endowed me with an indestructible faith in God. I'm proud to report that the Little Rock experience also gave us courage, strength, and hope. We 9 grew up to become productive citizens with special insights about how important it is to respect the value of every human life. I'm often asked, in view of the state of race relations today, if our effort was in vain. Would I integrate Central if I had to do it over again? My answer is yes, unequivocally yes. I take pride in the fact that although the fight for equality must continue, our 1957 effort catapulted the civil rights movement forward a giant step and shifted the fight to a more dignified battlefield. For the first time in history, a president took a very bold step to defend civil rights, our civil rights. Back then, I naively believed that if we could just end segregation in the schools, all barriers of inequality would fall. If you had asked me in 1957 what I expected, I would have told you that by this time our struggle for human rights would have been won. Not so. But I'm consoled by the words my grandmother spoke. Even when the battle is long and the path is steep, a true warrior does not give up. If each one of us does not step forward to claim our rights, we are doomed to an eternal wait in hopes those who would usurp them will become benevolent. The Bible says, watch, fight, and pray. Although I'm perplexed by the state of race relations in this country today, I am at the same time very hopeful because I have ample evidence that what grandmother promised me is true. With time and love, God solves all our problems. When we returned to Central High for our first reunion in 1987, many Little Rock residents, white and black, greeted the 9 of us as heroines and heroes. Hometown white folk in the mall smiled and said hello and offered directions even when they did not recognize us from our newspaper photos. During all the fancy ceremonies, some of Arkansas's highest officials and businessmen came from far and wide to welcome us. And perhaps the most outstanding evidence that things have indeed changed for the better was the attitude of Governor Bill Clinton. "Call me Bill," he said, extending his hand, looking me in the eye. "Y'all come on up to the house and sit a while." He flashed that charming grin of his. A few minutes of conversation assured me that his warm invitation was genuine. He is, after all, a man my brother refers to as good people, based on their working relationship over the years. So, my 8 friends and I found ourselves hanging out at the governor's mansion, the one Fulvisville. Governor Clinton sauntered about serving soft drinks and peanuts. He and his wife Hillary were the kind of host and hostess who could make me feel at home even in the place where Fulvis had hatched his devilish strategies to get the 9 of us out of Central High School by any means possible. Y'all ought to think about coming on back home now. Things are different, Governor Clinton said. He'd been 11 years old when Faubus waged his segregationist battle against us. He displayed genuine respect for our contribution to the civil rights struggle. That visit was to become an evening I shall always treasure. As Chelsea played the piano and Bill and Hillary talked to me as though we'd known each other always, I found myself thinking, oh, Mr. Faubus, if only you and your friends could see us now. My grandmother India always said, gotta point a finger at our family, asking for just a bit more discipline, more praying, and more hard work because he'd blessed us with good health and good brains. My mother was one of the first few blacks to integrate the University of Arkansas, graduating in 1954. 3 years later, when Grandma discovered I would be one of the first blacks to attend Central High School, she said the nightmare that had surrounded my birth was proof positive that destiny had assigned me a special task. First off, I was born on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 1941. Mother says while she was giving birth to me, there was a big uproar with the announcement that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. She remembers how astonished she was, and yet her focus was necessarily on the task at hand. There was trouble with my delivery because Mom was tiny and I was 9 pounds. The doctor used forceps to deliver me and injured my scalp. A few days later, I fell ill with a massive infection. Mother took me to the White Hospital, which reluctantly treated the families of black men who worked on the railroad. A doctor operated to save my life by inserting a drainage system beneath my scalp. 24 hours later, I wasn't getting better. Whenever Mother sought help, neither the nurses nor the doctors would take her seriously enough to examine me. Instead, they said, just give us some time. 2 days after my operation, my temperature soared to 106 and I started convulsing. Mother sent for the minister to give me the last rites, and relatives were gathering to say farewell. That evening, while Grandmother sat in my hospital room, rocking me back and forth as she hummed her favorite hymn, Mother paced the floor, weeping aloud in her despair. A black janitor who was sweeping the hallway asked why she was crying. She explained that I was dying because the infection in my head had grown worse. The man extended his sympathy. As he turned to walk away, dragging his broom behind him, he mumbled that he guessed the Epsom salts hadn't worked after all. Mother ran after him and asked him what he meant. He'd explained that a couple of days before, he had been cleaning the operating room as they finished up with my surgery. He had heard the doctor tell the white nurse to irrigate my head with Epsom salts and warm water every 2 or 3 hours, or I wouldn't make it. Mother shouted the words, Epsom salts and water, as she raced down the hall, desperately searching for a nurse. The woman was indignant, saying, yes, come to think of it, the doctor had said something about Epsom salts. But we don't coddle niggas, she growled. Mother didn't talk back to the nurse. She knew Daddy's job was at stake. Instead, she sent for Epsom salts and began the treatment right away. Within 2 days, I was remarkably better. The minister went home, the sisters from the church abandoned their death watch, declaring they'd witnessed a miracle. So 15 years later, when I was selected to integrate Central High, Grandmother said, now you see, that's the reason God spared your life. You're supposed to carry this banner for our people. And one of the things that we want to do, and I think in trying to encourage some of our young people to become more aware of their history, is to, in individual stories of people that they might be able to relate to, is to be able to get the sense that whatever fights they have, they can fight those fights, that people have fought different fights before them, and they have come out and conquered many of those battles, conquered some of those hurdles, and have done great things with their lives. And I think that's a message our children, our teenagers in particular, need to hear.